In this video, I wanted to discuss image formats briefly. Now, whenever you render something in the render view, that render is temporary. So if you close the window, the render goes away. Or if you choose to render a different camera, the previous render eventually is destroyed. What you can do, though, is save an image out of the render view and save it to disk. When you save it to disk, you have to choose an image format so you can save that file out. Also, if you were to batch render, you'd render out either a movie or a series of images, and once again, you'd have to choose the image format. So in that case, I'm going to show you how to save an image out of the render view, and then some of the more commonly used image formats. So if you want to save an image, just go up to File in the render view, and go to Save Image. When you go to Save Image, the file browser opens up. And just like when you open a scene or save a scene, you can choose to go to a particular directory. For example, I'll go to my desktop. In this case, you can choose a name for the file you're going to save out. I'll call this test. And then you can choose your format down here at the bottom where it says Files of Type. Now, if I click that menu, you'll see a long list of different image formats. So which one should you use? We'll talk about a few of the common ones. For example, there's JPEG, JPEG. That's a very common format that's used on the internet. The only disadvantage of JPEG is it tends to be compressed, and with the compression, you might have some loss of quality. JPEG is okay for a test, but it's not really good for a final version. To go one further, there's Maya IFF. IFF is a native Maya format that's very, very flexible. The only trouble with Maya IFF is some programs like Photoshop might not be able to read it, so it's a little bit more esoteric. Whereas JPEG is used very commonly, so pretty much every digital paint program out there can read JPEG. To go a little bit further in the list, there's PSD. PSD is a Photoshop native format. So it's great if you're going to bring something into Photoshop. To go further down the list, there's Targa. Targa is very commonly used at studios. Targa is great, has high quality, you don't really have any loss of compression, and it's a very reliable file format. It's not as small as JPEG in terms of file size, but again, it's a reliable one to use. The great thing about Targa is it also carries alpha. So if you do want to save an image and save its alpha channel and thereby retain its transparency information, Targa is one you could select. In comparison, JPEG does not support an alpha channel. So if you were to save an image in JPEG, there would be the RGB channels, but there would be no alpha. Targa supports alpha. To go one further, there's TIFF. TIFF is also very commonly used, and TIFF also supports alpha. TIFF has a lot of variations out there, so it's not as consistent as Targa might be, but again, it's used in many different studios. And at the very bottom is bitmap, which is an old format, which is great for, again, tests, but is not as necessarily good as Targa or TIFF. So you can choose any of these formats you want to. So if you just want to save something out as reference as a test, JPEG was probably fine. But if you're trying to save out something nicer that you might be using on professional production, then Targa or TIFF might be the way to go. So once you choose your format, for instance, I'll go down and choose Targa, and you've already chosen your name and chosen your directory, you can just hit Save. And thereby the image that you see in your render view is saved out to disk. Now we'll return to the discussion about formats in a little bit more detail once we get to the render settings, once we get to batch rendering.